Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleep Science. Tonight, let's take a slow, strange walk into a thought experiment you've probably never fully unpacked. One that starts with the unsettling possibility that this whole thing, this Earth, this life, might just be a test. Picture it now. You waking up in this body you didn't design, on a planet spinning suspiciously fast, surrounded by 7 billion other confused test takers who also seem to have misplaced their instruction manuals. The sky hums above with cosmic silence. Gravity holds you politely hostage, and the rules, well, they're written in everything from ancient poetry to awkward government pamphlets. You didn't sign up for this class. Or did you? You probably won't survive this, by the way. Not the episode, just life in general. No pressure. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere peculiar, say, a yurt in Mongolia or a bus stop in Oslo, drop your location and local time in the comments. I promise you're not the only night owl wondering what it all means. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive here without a clue. No pop-up tutorial, no skip intro button, just a messy cry, some blinding lights, and eventually bills. Right from the start, it's like Earth expects you to learn as you go, sink or swim. You start off knowing nothing except maybe how to scream and grip someone's finger with impressive conviction. There's no recollection of where you came from, no syllabus explaining the objectives. And yet something feels organized. You begin noticing it early. The way the sun rises with precision, how your hunger returns on a clock-like cycle, the weird coincidence that bananas come pre-wrapped and your fingers fit perfectly into nostrils, but we'll get to evolutionary oddities later. For now, you're just trying to make sense of what you've been dropped into. Your environment feels curated, doesn't it? Earth offers just enough beauty to distract you and just enough peril to keep you from getting cocky. You get sunsets, gorgeous, warm, and timed for your commute. But you also get jellyfish that are essentially floating pain buttons. There's something about that balance that almost feels deliberate. Historically speaking, you wouldn't be the first to notice this. Philosophers from Plato to Descartes have questioned the nature of reality. Descartes famously doubted everything except his own doubting, an overachiever's way of saying, "This test is fishy." Meanwhile, the ancient Gnostics, they flat out believed Earth was a prison built by a lesser god. Yeah, real glass half-empty crowd. But the idea that Earth might be more than a passive stage, that it might be some kind of trial, that thought doesn't fade. It shows up in religion, sci-fi, stoned college dorms, and yes, slightly unhinged but soothing sleep documentaries like this one. Because here's the thing, it's not just the complexity of the world, it's how personal it feels. Ever notice how certain problems seem tailored to you? Like the universe sends out custom quizzes. One person gets heartbreak, another gets chronic traffic. One person loses their keys daily. Someone else gets deeply philosophical every time they microwave a burrito. The randomness starts to feel like it's testing not just your survival, but your spirit. And what about the stuff you don't get tested on? Like, you never wake up with a surprise pop quiz about the square root of an orange. But you do find yourself repeatedly confronting themes: trust, patience, grief, forgiveness. Almost like the test isn't about facts, it's about how you respond. Now here, where it gets a bit niche. There's a fringe theory known as the soul contract hypothesis. It's not exactly peer-reviewed, but it's sticky. According to this idea, you agreed to come here. You chose Earth, chose your family, your body, your major plot points. Not because you're a masochist, though jury's out, but because Earth is the ultimate growth opportunity, the Harvard of pain tolerance. the Mount Everest of character development. Historians still argue whether ancient mystery schools truly believed in this concept of chosen incarnations, or whether that's modern spiritual fan fiction retrofitted into Egyptian and Greek rituals. Either way, the core idea is tantalizing, that Earth is structured not for comfort, but for evolution. Still, if this is a test, it's not a fair one. Let's be honest. You're thrown into the game mid-match, with no access to the rules, playing against opponents who might be imaginary and the scoreboard. Yeah, that's nowhere in sight. Also, there's a decent chance someone on your team thinks the Earth is flat. You're told to succeed, but success keeps changing definitions. First it's grades, then it's money, then it's inner peace, then it's likes on a post about inner peace. The goalposts move. Constantly, suspiciously. And you know what makes it more suspicious? How often Earth almost makes sense. Take the Fibonacci sequence. It's everywhere in pine cones, hurricanes, and snail shells. Beautiful spiraling math just baked into nature. A cosmic watermark, a hint, or just a sign that math is clingy. There's also the uncanny sensation that your life has themes. Ever had one year where everything seemed to revolve around letting go, or trusting the process, or figuring out how to fix your posture? Again, maybe coincidence, or maybe it's test content module by module. But don't get too paranoid. Not everything is a riddle. Some things are just weird. Like the fact that octopuses have 3 hearts and blue blood, or that wombat poop is cube-shaped, or that your own knees contain memories from early childhood. Well, sort of, if you count trauma stored in fascia. Earth's syllabus includes the absurd, possibly just to keep you humble. And maybe that's part of the test, too. Not just to understand Earth, but to exist here without breaking under its weirdness. To find peace in the unknown. To keep going, even when the quiz seems rigged. The truth is, you're probably never going to get the test results. No little envelope at the end, no gold star or final grade. Maybe that's what makes it real, or maybe that's what makes it more like a test. You're a few years into life when the patternage starts. Maybe it's when you first realize your birthday falls on a Tuesday again, or when you notice how leaves always seem to know exactly when to die, like there's a memo you missed. Maybe it's the moment you hear a song at just the right time, too perfect to be random, and you start to suspect there's something behind all this. Not necessarily someone, just something. The test, if it exists, isn't loud. It doesn't hand you a clipboard and say, circle all the fears you haven't faced yet. It speaks in echoes, in loops, in patterns. You start seeing them everywhere. Seasons roll around like clockwork despite humanity's best attempts to ruin them. Trees don't just drop their leaves, they schedule it. Migratory birds, jet setters on cosmic autopilot. The tides obey the moon like some ancient agreement. And you yawn every night at the same time like some sleepy little automaton. That's not just rhythm, that's design, or at least that's the vibe. Even your own biology is suspiciously pattern-rich. Your heartbeat has a tempo. Your breath follows waves. Your sleep follows cycles, unless you binge-watch entire streaming series at 3 a.m., in which case, your test score just took a hit. The ancient world was obsessed with these patterns. The Babylonians, for example, were early fans of celestial forecasting. They tracked star movements, noticed eclipses weren't just cosmic hiccups, and built ziggurats not just to impress, but to observe. They were trying to decode the test, or maybe spy on the proctors. You're doing something similar now, just with phone apps and caffeine instead of incense and goat entrails. But the motivation hasn't changed. You're still trying to make sense of repeating events and hidden clues. still trying to peek behind the curtain and figure out why things always happen just so. But it's not just the sky. You begin to notice social patterns too. Arguments that feel eerily familiar. Personal failures that cycle back like unfinished homework. Ever dated the same person 3 times in different bodies? Yeah, that's a pattern. Welcome to the midterm you can't escape. Carl Jung called these archetypes, humanity's collective dream characters. He believed you weren't just imagining connections, you were syncing up with something bigger, a shared subconscious syllabus, if you will. And yes, that's already more organized than your actual school curriculum. And it gets weirder. The Fibonacci sequence we touched on, it's not a fluke. It shows up in sunflower spirals, the branching of trees, even the shape of hurricanes. Nature repeats beauty like it's trying to remind you this means something, or at least you're supposed to notice. Historians still argue whether ancient structures like Stonehenge and the pyramids were intentionally designed to mirror these cosmic patterns, or whether modern humans just desperately want meaning where there was once just math and manpower. Either way, it feeds the same feeling. That Earth didn't just happen. Now take that eerie repetition and layer it with human behavior. Think about how history loops. Empires rise, they stretch too far, they collapse. Then someone else tries it. Rinse, repeat. We create new ideologies, fight over them, forget the lessons, and do it all again, usually with worse fashion each time. You start to wonder if we're all retaking the same final exam. One fringe theory posits that we're in a time-looped curriculum, a concept not totally dissimilar from the Buddhist idea of samsara or Nietzsche's eternal recurrence. According to this view, we keep getting recycled into this world until we pass some threshold of understanding, like spiritual Groundhog Day, but with more taxes and less Bill Murray. It's oddly comforting, because if there are patterns, maybe there's a plan. And if there's a plan, maybe you're not just floundering, maybe you're mid-test. Of course, not all patterns are reassuring. You start to notice the pattern of people pretending everything's fine. The way civilization insists on pretending to function, despite the fact that no one really understands how democracy, electricity, or insurance actually work. It's almost like Earth wants you to feel in control without ever being in control. Part of the curriculum, maybe. There's also a pattern to moments of wonder, a formula almost. You look at a sky full of stars or a face full of laughter and time slows. You feel like you're closer to understanding something, but the moment always slips away. You can't hold it. You can only remember how it felt. That's the kind of thing a sneaky test would do. Dangle the truth just long enough to test whether you're paying attention. Even dreams have structure. Albeit chaotic, Salvador Dali on a caffeine bender structure. You revisit the same places, the same themes, sometimes the same people, like your subconscious is reviewing old material, hinting at unfinished business. Some researchers believe dreams are your brain's way of cleaning up, like taking out the mental trash. But others, they're not so sure. Some scientists argue dreams could be parallel test environments, simulations within the simulation, extra credit in REM. And don't forget déjà vu, that slippery glitch where you know you've been here before. It happens fast, unnerving, like the test sheet just scrolled back without your permission. You weren't supposed to notice, but you did. Oops. There's a theory, no surprise, it's not exactly mainstream, that déjà vu is a marker, a checkpoint, a brief flash reminding you that you're on track, or very much not, that it's been seen before because you've been here before. Same moment, same test. You get older and the patterns deepen. Maybe you start noticing the cycles of emotion, how sadness returns in seasons, how growth always seems to follow some shattering loss. You're taught that life goes on, but really life loops. The difference is subtle, but you feel it. In a world where nothing seems certain, these recurring motifs become anchors. They're not just observations anymore, they're hints, breadcrumbs. You start to trust them, maybe too much. And that's when the test gets trickier. It starts repeating itself with variation. The same lesson, but in disguise. Same mistake, but this time with a mustache. Earth keeps asking, did you actually learn it? Or did you just recognize the pattern? That's the thing about this kind of test. It's not looking for memorization. It wants transformation. And the pattern you might be most familiar with. Waking up every day still not knowing what the test is, but showing up anyway. Bleary-eyed, brushing teeth, feeding the cat, waiting for the next clue to whisper through the cracks in routine. You sit there one day, quiet moment, cup of something warm, and your attention drifts inward. Not in a poetic, metaphorical way, literally inward, into your body, and you realize this thing you're wearing, this skin-wrapped, bone-hinged, squishy survival suit, it's suspiciously complex, almost too complex. It blinks automatically, heals paper cuts, runs diagnostics in your sleep, and can survive several decades with only moderate hydration and questionable snack choices. It can grow another human inside itself. It can produce tears, laughter, and sometimes both at once while watching emotionally manipulative car commercials. And that's when it hits you. This thing might be a puzzle box. Your body, with all its quirks and mysteries, doesn't just exist, it responds. It sends signals: hunger, pain, goosebumps, that tight chest feeling when something's wrong. Maybe that's not malfunction, maybe that's feedback, gradding. Some believe the body is your interface for the Earth test, like a smart suit you pilot. You don't consciously tell your liver what to do or monitor your white blood cells like a video game. It's running an intricate program while you mostly focus on remembering where you parked. Take your immune system. That chaotic little army knows friend from foe better than your dating history ever will. It learns, remembers, adapts. It fights invisible battles daily against pathogens, allergens, and that slice of gas station sushi you knew was a bad idea. Ancient Ayurvedic texts viewed the body as both tool and teacher. Every organ carried symbolic meaning, every illness a coded message. Your kidneys weren't just filtration devices, they held fear. Your liver, anger. This wasn't just health, it was a curriculum. Historians still argue whether this was metaphorical wisdom or early psychophysiology. Either way, the idea persists. Your body isn't just a container, it's a collaborator, maybe even your lab partner for this whole Earth-side exam. And your brain, oh boy, the crown jewel of confusion. It processes 11 million bits of information per second and generously lets you consciously access about 50. Thanks, brain. Very cool. The rest, subconscious, background, mysterious. It filters, prioritizes, and hallucinates stability so you don't fall into existential spirals every time a ceiling fan moves weird. That's not just function, that's curation. Then there's the pineal gland, the tiny pea-sized mystery lurking dead center in your brain. Ancient cultures called it the seat of the soul. Modern science calls it the melatonin factory. Fringe theorists, they say it's your spiritual antenna, the Wi-Fi router for whatever cosmic exam proctor's beaming in the test questions. It calcifies with age. Curious, isn't it? Like the longer you're here, the blurrier the signal gets, almost like the test wants you to forget. And then there's pain. Nobody likes it, but it's oddly informative. Not just the don't touch that stove kind, but the emotional kind. Loss, rejection, shame. These are full-body alerts. You don't just feel them, you embody them. Shoulders curl, gut tightens, tears leap out like alarm bells. You think you're just reacting, but maybe you're being graded, not punished, graded. Like, can you feel this and still show kindness? Can you fall apart and rebuild? Can you sit with pain instead of numbing it? That doesn't mean suffering is noble, but maybe it's instructive, a brutal but effective lesson delivery system. Fringe thinkers like to say, your body is your karma, meaning the life you live literally shapes your form, not just in diet and injury, but in energy, in posture, in scars and tension patterns. It's woo-woo adjacent, sure, but try holding anger for a decade without it affecting your back. You can't. Your body records everything, the way a piano holds fingerprints of every song ever played. Then there's the odd experience of embodiment itself. You don't remember choosing this body, but you wear it like a rental car, slightly confused, semi-careful, and with a deep hope you'll return it undamaged. Ever looked in the mirror and thought, who is that? That moment of disconnection. It might be a glitch, or it might be a clue, like the body and the self are collaborating but not identical. Here's a thought experiment to try before bed. What if every ache, every craving, every bodily quirk is actually a part of your test, not a distraction from it? What if your itchy skin isn't just dry, it's prompting presence? What if your racing heart isn't panic, it's an invitation to slow down? You might roll your eyes, fair, but then think about how many times your body saved you without your awareness. That near trip your reflexes caught, the infection it quietly handled, the gut feeling that kept you out of something messy. The test might not just be written on stone tablets or glowing screens. It might be in your pulse, your breath, your belly. Biologists will tell you you're just a lucky cocktail of carbon and curiosity, born from evolutionary necessity and surviving by adaptation. And sure, there's truth in that, but it doesn't explain the poetry of it, the way your fingers naturally interlace, or the fact that a hug can lower cortisol, or the way your eyes leak when your heart hurts. That's more than function, that's design with flair. Also, nipples on men. We don't talk about that part of the design. Some test questions remain undefined. You start to realize the test might not be about escaping the body or transcending it. It might be about listening to it, learning through it, being in it fully while you're here. Because here's the quiet trick of Earth, your body going to leave before you do. You'll still be here in thought or memory or legacy while it becomes compost, star stuff again. But until then, it's your only real home. And maybe, just maybe, the first page of your test booklet. You're walking through your day, maybe halfway through your to-do list, halfway through your patience, and it hits you again. This whole life thing feels suspiciously dramatic. Not like reality TV dramatic. Well, sometimes. But more like Shakespearean, as if someone handed you a script and then immediately told you to improvise every scene. And the script, it's laced with emotions, the full messy spectrum. Joy that makes you want to dance barefoot in the rain, and heartbreak that makes you want to never feel again. And for some reason, the biggest emotions show up at the worst times, like grief on a Tuesday, or laughter at a funeral. Your feelings don't care about etiquette. It would almost be funny if it didn't feel like a setup. So you start wondering, is this the test? Not the body or the facts, but the emotional chaos you're wrapped in. Welcome to the human condition, a mid-level difficulty setting where you're smart enough to ask deep questions but not quite enlightened enough to get satisfying answers. Historians still argue whether humanity's emotional complexity was an evolutionary glitch or a survival strategy. After all, feeling fear might save you from lions. Feeling empathy might keep you from turning on your tribe. Or maybe feelings are just fancy alarms in the test maze, Warning, this experience matters. But somewhere along the line, things went from fight or flight to cry in the grocery store for no reason. You're not just reacting to threats anymore. You're reacting to memories, to imagined futures, to someone else's tone of voice in an email. Emotions are now a whole separate operating system, constantly pinging you with updates you didn't request. And guess what? Earth seems to poke this emotional bear constantly. It throws love at you, then loss. It lets you taste joy, then rips it away to see if you can still stand. It dangles hope just far enough to keep you reaching. It's not subtle, and it's definitely not easy. Ancient Stoics believed the test was to control your emotions, to rise above them like statues in togas, sipping reason. But Eastern philosophies, like certain strands of Buddhism and Taoism, see emotions not as obstacles but as flowing currents to observe without attachment. Either way, the message is clear. Emotions aren't accidents, they're invitations. You've probably noticed how Earth seems wired to provoke them. There's art, music, random acts of kindness, all engineered, it seems, to yank at your heart. Then there's bureaucracy, waiting rooms, people who chew with their mouths open, also engineered perhaps to test your restraint or break it completely. Why do you feel so much anyway? Most animals operate on basic emotion presets: fear, contentment, hunger, occasional rage. But you've got regret, nostalgia, existential dread mixed with a side of was that the right tone to use in that text? If Earth were just about survival, this emotional mess would be inefficient. But if Earth is a test, then emotions are the challenge level, the complex variable, the essay question at the end of every chapter. Love is the one that really messes with the grading curve. It doesn't make sense. It overrides logic. It blinds you to flaws, makes you take risks, makes you vulnerable. You know it can destroy you, and you still choose it, repeatedly. That's either the dumbest bug in the test system or the ultimate requirement to pass. Fringe theories claim that love is the final boss of Earth School, that until you learn to love without possession, attachment, or fear, unconditionally, expansively, you don't really graduate. Big claim, but there's something to it. Love makes you less selfish. And in a test environment where growth is the goal, that might be the answer they're looking for. But love also brings loss, always, if not now, later, and grief. That's its evil twin, a wrecking ball that shows up uninvited, breaks the furniture of your soul, and then hangs around like it owns the place. And you can't outrun it, not really. You can only feel it, let it teach, if you're brave. Now add in the rest of the emotional syllabus: shame, pride, jealousy, awe, confusion, guilt, relief, nostalgia, rage, compassion. No wonder you're tired. No wonder you want a nap for 14 years. The test isn't just difficult, it's exhausting. And Earth doesn't make it easier by simplifying anything. You're told to be kind, but not a doormat, to be confident, but not arrogant, to be strong, but also emotionally available, but also don't cry too much, but also don't bottle it up, but also, yeah, good luck with that. It's a moving target. One minute you're doing great, the next minute someone's upset, and now you're questioning your entire personality. Did you pass that interaction? Or was that a fail? Where's the rubric? In some ancient cultures, emotional outbursts were seen as spiritual events. Even mental illness was interpreted as a misalignment with higher forces. Today, it's all pathologized, diagnosed, medicated. Not invalidly, there's value in managing brain chemistry. But sometimes maybe the emotional explosion isn't dysfunction. It's a flare gun. The soul shouting, "Hey, you, pay attention, this matters." You start to notice that the most emotionally intense moments often become the most transformative. The breakup that taught you boundaries, the failure that lit your ambition, the shame that cracked you open to empathy. These weren't detours. These were the class. The feelings are the test. Not the situations, not the events, but how you feel them, how you hold them, whether you let them pass through or let them harden into armor. You could, if you wanted, opt out, numb yourself, distract, stay safely on the emotional surface. A lot of people do. The test allows it, but maybe that's the lowest grade possible, to never really feel. So what do you do instead? You lean in, carefully, curiously. You start treating your emotions not as enemies but as instructors. You start asking them questions. Why am I angry? What am I protecting? Why am I sad? What am I letting go? It's not therapy, it's strategy. You treat your heart like a compass, not a flaw. And suddenly, the world makes just a little more sense. Or at least it hurts less. Because if this is a test, and if emotions are part of it, then maybe every feeling is a clue, and every reaction is a response you get to improve next time. The human condition isn't a punishment, it's the coursework. And guess what? You're not flunking nearly as hard as you think. You're walking along, minding your business, probably thinking about lunch. When it happens again, something too perfect unfolds in front of you. Maybe it's bumping into an old friend you were just thinking about. Maybe it's seeing the exact word you were about to say pop up in a stranger's conversation. Or maybe it's one of those eerie moments where everything lines up, like you're being watched by something with a flair for dramatic timing. You call it coincidence, but in the back of your mind, you're already suspicious. Because how many coincidences does it take before they start to feel like clues? They pile up over the years, don't they? People who appear just when you're about to give up. An overheard sentence that answers a question you hadn't asked out loud. Recurring symbols. That one number that seems to follow you from license plates to hotel rooms to microwave timers. It starts to feel like life trying to tell you something, or test your awareness, or both. Fringe philosophers call these synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that feel like part of a bigger script. Carl Jung coined the term after one too many that's weird moments in his therapy sessions. He thought they pointed to an invisible web connecting mind and matter. He didn't claim to understand it fully, just that it was real enough to be noticed and strange enough to be taken seriously. Historians still argue whether Jung's synchronicity concept was a legitimate insight into the human psyche or just a poetic rebranding of selective memory. But the point remains, strange alignments exist, and Earth seems to love sprinkling them around like breadcrumbs in a cosmic escape room. The test, maybe, isn't just surviving Earth, it's noticing it, tuning into the hidden patterns, especially the personal ones. Ever had a dream that seemed to predict something? Or had someone call you just as you were picking up your phone to call them? Rationally, you can write it off. Brains are pattern-seeking missiles, but emotionally, it feels like a nod, like the simulation winked at you. And that's when you start cataloging these moments. A mental folder marked probably nothing but still. It's filled with near misses, moments of perfect timing, and the kind of serendipity that makes you stop and whisper, "Okay, what is this place?" If Earth is a test, these clues might not be accidents. They might be designed to keep you curious, awake, slightly haunted. Take the concept of fate. In most ancient cultures, fate wasn't just superstition, it was structure. The Greeks believed in the Moirai, the three fates who spun, measured, and cut the thread of every life. The Norse had the norns. The Chinese tracked fate through astrology, birth dates, and even facial features. Fate wasn't an excuse, it was a map, a test route you were pre-scheduled to walk. But there's a modern counterargument: free will. You choose. You steer. You make mistakes and miracles and messy decisions. No pre-written answers, just a constantly updating multiple-choice form filled with eraser marks and coffee stains. So which is it? The spooky part is, it might be both. What if you picked the test before you got here, then forgot all the instructions on purpose? What if part of the challenge is learning how to feel your way forward through the fog? Maybe the clues are just there to remind you, you're not lost. You're just in the middle of the exam. And yet, some of these coincidences feel too cruel. You think of people who almost missed the flight that crashed, or those who, by pure chance, avoided a disaster. You think of missed connections, perfectly timed illnesses, a wrong turn that saved a life. It's almost unbearable to believe it means something, because if it does, then every tragedy might also be on the syllabus. That's where the test gets hard. Because sometimes the clues are heavy, the timing hurts, the lesson stings. And still, you keep getting those little nudges. The song that comes on when you need it. The stranger's kind word that somehow heals something ancient in you. The day that begins badly but ends with unexpected laughter and just enough hope to keep going. It's like life throws you pop quizzes. You didn't ask for them, but they show up anyway. Can you stay kind when everything feels unfair? Can you make peace with not knowing why this is happening? Can you find meaning in a moment that doesn't make sense yet? Sometimes the answer is no, and that's okay. The test, as far as you can tell, allows retries. But the deeper you go, the more you start to recognize your own themes. Like your life has a soundtrack playing quietly in the background. The same types of people enter, exit, return. You keep being asked the same questions, just in new costumes. You don't even have to believe in the mystical for this to work. Even purely psychologically, your brain is wired to seek meaning. You remember things that feel personal. You interpret patterns where others might see chaos. And that might be the test, to interpret your life as if it matters. Because maybe it does. Let's say this life isn't random, not fully. Let's say it's semi-scripted, not like a puppet show, but like improv with a fixed destination. Then these coincidences, they're not distractions, they're flashcards, progress markers, that uncanny timing, a cosmic high five, that repeating number, a breadcrumb. You don't need to figure out the full pattern. That's not the assignment. You just need to stay awake enough to notice when the test blinks at you. And no, not every coincidence means something. Sometimes a duck is just a duck, even if it waddles past at the exact moment you're pondering your fear of commitment. But sometimes the duck is part of the lesson. You don't have to be certain. You just have to be willing to wonder. Because in a world that often feels random, noticing meaning, even when it's unprovable, is an act of courage. And it might just be the bravest test response of all. You flip open a history book, or more likely, scroll past one of those overly dramatic online timelines, and you start to feel a chill. Not because of the sheer number of wars, revolutions, and uncomfortable mustaches, but because it all looks familiar, too familiar. It's like you're watching the same scenes play out era after era, just in different costumes. New names, same mistakes, the dates change, the weapons evolve, the speeches get longer, but the storyline, it's stuck on repeat. If Earth is a test, then humanity's history might just be the world's most chaotic group project. Empires rise, empires fall, utopias are promised, then promptly ruined by someone with a god complex. Social progress leaps forward and then stumbles backward like a drunk philosopher. It's hard not to notice the patterns, and once you do, you can't unsee them. Take ancient Rome, for example. Peak civilization. Roads, aqueducts, democracy-ish. Then came the corruption, the moral panic, the reality show politics, and the slow collapse. Sound familiar? It should. Historians still argue whether modern societies are genuinely advancing or just remixing Rome with better Wi-Fi and slightly more disappointing bread. You watch nations repeat the same social errors: greed, tribalism, the us versus them instinct dressed up in fancy flags and economic policy. Over and over, the test questions reappear. Different fonts, same bad handwriting. You'd think we'd learn, right? But no. Humanity seems determined to leave its homework until the very last minute. And it's not just geopolitics, it's philosophy, religion, morality. Humans keep inventing new systems to explain the test, only to fall into the same disagreements. What's the right way to live? What does it mean to be good? What happens when we die? Spoiler, no one agrees, never has. That's the tricky part about history. It's not just a record of events. It's a case study in repeating test failures. Each generation believes they finally understand the lesson, and each one leaves behind a fresh set of warning signs the next mostly ignores. But here's the strange thing. For all its chaos, history also reveals something deeper: a pulse, a slow, often painful arc towards something. A faint sense that, despite all the spiraling and crashing, something might actually be evolving. Think about it. Yes, there's still cruelty, but fewer people are entertained by public executions, unless you count internet drama. Yes, inequality still thrives, but more people recognize it and name it. There's movement, resistance, a struggle for awareness. It's not perfect, but it's something. Maybe Earth's test isn't about getting it right immediately. Maybe it's about choosing growth, even when history makes cynicism feel like the safer bet. And if you look closely, you'll spot the personal version of this pattern too. You repeat lessons in your own life, don't you? Same kinds of relationships, same emotional landmines, the way you always overwork, or always avoid confrontation, or always pick the worst seat in group therapy. Earth keeps handing you the same scenario, gently at first, then louder, like it's saying, "Are you ready now?" It's personal history echoing the big one. You don't have to get it right the first time. You just have to notice. That might be the real test, seeing the pattern and choosing differently. But back to the big picture for a moment. History is also full of anomalies, little moments where the script changes, where someone steps outside the loop, like Gandhi, or Hypatia, or Harriet Tubman, who rewrote the rules of fear and freedom with sheer willpower, or Nikola Tesla, who may or may not have been part mad scientist, part time traveler. These people broke the cycle, not just because they were smart or brave, but because they saw through it. They understood the test wasn't about power. It was about presence, about using what they had to shift the game, even just a little. There's a fringe theory that certain individuals are plant people, not in the leafy sense, but in the idea that they were inserted into history with a specific mission, to change the pattern, not to solve it completely, just to nudge it, 1 percentage point closer to wisdom. Wild theory, but again, what if? Even major religions carry the echo of this idea. Prophets sent with messages, saviors sacrificed, warnings issued. The divine trying to pass Earth some cheat codes, usually ignored, occasionally misquoted, often merchandised. And yet the messages stick around. Love your neighbor, seek truth, don't hoard camels. The rules are simple, living them, that's the hard part. So why does the pattern repeat? Are we that stubborn? Possibly, but maybe there's another layer. Maybe the test isn't just about solving the pattern, it's about experiencing it, feeling the frustration, recognizing the absurdity, laughing through it, crying in it. Not because you're failing, but because the lesson only lands when you live it. You can't truly understand compassion from reading a textbook. You have to feel loss, feel injustice, sit inside discomfort long enough that you start to recognize its shape, and then, maybe, do something different next time. And that brings you to the most frustrating part of all. There might not be one right answer. This test may not have a clean pass-fail. It might be graded on intention, effort, awareness. Maybe you don't need to be perfect. Maybe you just need to be conscious. You're not expected to rewrite history, just to not repeat your part in it blindly. So you read the old stories, the rise and fall, the heartbreak and hope, and you start to see your place in it, not as a victim, not as a spectator, but as a participant, someone who's been handed the test not for the first time, but maybe for the 50th or 500th. You're not here to memorize history. You're here to feel it, respond to it, break its loop even just a little. And when you do, you might just change the pattern for the next test taker. You stare at the screen in your hand, the rectangle you carry everywhere, cradle before sleep, and often consult before making even the smallest decision, like whether to bring an umbrella or fully panic. And you realize, this thing, it feels like a cheat code. Technology, once just sharpened rocks and hopeful fire, is now a glowing portal to infinite information, dopamine loops, and the worst customer service chats imaginable. It makes everything easier and somehow harder at the same time. Which brings us to a very strange question. If Earth is a test, did we just build our own set of answer keys? Or are we falling for the most elaborate distraction of all? You scroll, you tap, you bookmark life hacks and quote philosophers and binge documentaries about enlightenment while sitting in the same hoodie for 3 days. You Google questions no oracle in history would have predicted, like do penguins have knees, or how to fake confidence in a Zoom meeting. And in the middle of all that information, do you feel smarter, wiser, more awake? Or are you just upgrading your ability to avoid? Technology makes life easier, but tests aren't supposed to be easy. That's kind of the point. So what if technology is supposed to test something else, like your discernment, your focus, your resistance to the siren song of distraction in the middle of your spiritual final exam? Back in the Bronze Age, if you wanted to gain knowledge, you had to walk to a dusty temple, maybe dodge a snake or two, and memorize sacred texts from someone with intimidating facial hair. Now, you can summon a 14-hour lecture on metaphysics while lying upside down on your couch with one sock on. Historians still argue whether the printing press was humanity's biggest test upgrade or the beginning of the slow erosion of wisdom via mass production. Either way, the message is clear. Every tool we invent shifts the shape of the test. And now we have the internet. A glorious, chaotic, open book exam where every possible answer is available, including the completely wrong ones with 3 million views and a merch store. It's seductive. You start to think access equals understanding, that if you read enough, you'll transcend something, that if you consume enough knowledge, you'll level up. But this isn't an RPG. You can't scroll your way to enlightenment. And that's where the test gets trickier. Because sometimes technology does help you wake up. A meditation app, a well-timed podcast, that oddly emotional AI art of a dolphin riding a meteor. These things can open doors, but they can also become windows you never step through. You get stuck observing instead of participating. And that's the catch. If you're not careful, you start outsourcing your thinking, your decisions, even your emotions, like, what should I feel about this? Better check the trending hashtags first. There's a theory, fringe of course, that advanced civilizations fail their planetary test not through war, but through distraction. That the more tools they build, the more they forget why they're building them. That they chase convenience until they can no longer sit still in their own silence. And suddenly, that hits a little close to home. You're in a world where you can simulate almost anything: beauty, connection, even purpose. There are games where you create lives and jobs and tiny pixelated children, and you play them for hours, while your real plants die of thirst 4 feet away. Maybe that's the new twist of the Earth exam. The challenge isn't scarcity, it's overload. The test is not, can you build it? But can you not lose yourself once it's built? You think of the Tower of Babel, an ancient myth where humans tried to build a tower to reach the heavens. The gods weren't impressed. They scrambled the languages. The lesson? Maybe it wasn't about arrogance. Maybe it was about rushing ahead without remembering the purpose. You've built your own towers now, glowing, humming, global, and the language isn't scrambled, it's just endless. So what do? Give it all up? Move to the woods and communicate only via flute? Probably not, but maybe, just maybe, you stop and ask, is this helping me take the test or escape it? You begin to use tech more like a compass, less like a crutch. You start noticing when it pulls you deeper into awareness and when it drags you away. You start choosing what to consume instead of letting it consume you. Because here's the plot twist. The internet might be the final exam for attention. Not just what you pay attention to, but how long. Can you sit with silence? Can you read a full sentence without checking notifications? Can you let your mind wander somewhere other than the latest doom scroll? There's an old Zen saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. And now, before enlightenment, charge phone, scroll memes. After enlightenment, turn on do not disturb. But seriously, maybe tech isn't the enemy. Maybe it's the mirror. It reflects how easily you drift, how deeply you crave stimulation, how little you sit with your thoughts. And once you see that clearly, you're back in the game, focused, aware, testing again. It's not about deleting your accounts. It's about using them with intention, not letting the algorithm pick your priorities, not letting every vibration derail your day, not mistaking being informed for being alive. Because you're still in the test. Every tap, every click, every minute spent avoiding discomfort, that's part of the grading criteria now. And you start asking yourself, what if I already know more than I think? What if I'm here not to download more answers, but to remember the ones I buried under all this noise? Technology won't fail you, but using it to forget who you are, that might. So maybe tonight, after this episode, you don't open another app. Maybe you don't check one more feed. Maybe you just sit quietly and let your mind be your own again. That could be the most rebellious, high-scoring test move of all. You're having a conversation, maybe a deep one, maybe just trying to explain why pineapple on pizza is a valid lifestyle choice. And suddenly it happens. The glitch. You say something, they hear something else. You clarify, they double down. You're both speaking the same language technically, but somehow you're not. Language is supposed to be our bridge, our magic, the tool that lifts us above the animals and lets us make podcasts about sandwich rankings. But if you've ever tried explaining your feelings in less than 17 disclaimers and one interpretive dance, you know the truth. Language is buggy. It feels like it's part of the test. Think about it. You're thrown onto Earth, expected to communicate vital emotions, negotiate peace, express love, resolve conflict, and say, "I'm sorry," in just the right tone. And your tools are words that change meaning depending on mood, culture, punctuation, and whether or not there's Wi-Fi. Who designed this part of the exam? Historians still argue whether early languages developed naturally or were part of some prehistoric cognitive explosion, what they call the Great Leap Forward. One day, it was grunts and hand motions. The next, grammar, symbolism, metaphors, and poetry. So much poetry. And yet, for all our linguistic evolution, we're still just barely getting our point across. You can order your coffee with 10 specific adjectives, but try to explain heartbreak. Suddenly, the dictionary's a joke. There's a theory, more esoteric than accepted, that Earth's language system was deliberately scattered, a spiritual echo of the Tower of Babel myth. According to this view, the multiplicity of languages isn't just diversity, it's deliberate confusion, so that we're forced to go deeper than words, to learn to listen beyond what's said. You feel it, don't you? That gap between what you mean and what they hear, between the thought and the sentence, between the text and how someone reads it at 2 a.m. with their own baggage whispering in their ear. You send a simple message, "Hey, are you okay?" They read, "You're mad at me, aren't you?" The test isn't just about speaking. It's about being understood and understanding back. But here, where it gets sneaky. Because sometimes, even when words do their job, they're still not enough. You say, "I love you," but that doesn't explain the feeling. You say, "I'm sorry," but that doesn't undo the damage. You say, "I'm fine." And we all know that's code for "I'm absolutely not fine, but I don't have the vocabulary for this right now." So what's the point? Maybe that is the point. Maybe the challenge of language is part of what forces us to grow, to develop empathy, to get curious. Because when words fail, you have to rely on something else. Tone, timing, touch, silence. You have to feel your way to connection. And that's harder than memorizing grammar rules. Communication isn't just output, it's decoding. You listen for what's under the words, what's unsaid, what's trembling at the edges, the sigh before the sentence, the pause that says more than the paragraph. And you start to realize, every conversation is its own tiny test. Can you stay present? Can you listen without forming your reply? Can you speak truth without slicing someone open? Can you hold silence when words would only distort it? It's subtle but profound. Language is also time-locked. Words are snapshots of understanding in specific eras. What meant great in one century might mean mediocre in another. Think about how quickly slang mutates. 1 minute fire is dangerous. The next it's a compliment, then it's probably back to being dangerous again. Even emoji, modern cave art, are ambiguous. That one yellow face, is it laughing or crying, sarcastic or sincere? You're not sure, but you send it anyway and hope for the best. In ancient cultures, words were sacred. In Egypt, scribes were considered spiritual gatekeepers. In the Vedic tradition, sound itself, vibration, was believed to shape reality. Om wasn't just a chant, it was a building block of existence. They didn't use words casually. Every sound carried intent. You look at how we use language now, tweets, comments, sarcasm layered over irony, and you wonder, have we passed or failed that part of the test? Or are we just in the middle of it? Here's the real kicker. Language creates your inner world. The words you use internally shape your thoughts. Your inner monologue, that's the narrator of your personal exam, and it's often not the nicest. You messed that up. Why did you say that? You're not doing enough. You wouldn't let someone else talk to your friend that way, but your inner voice gets away with it, daily. Maybe part of the test is learning to translate even yourself with compassion. Because if you can't speak gently to yourself, you'll never hear the world correctly. So what do? You slow down. You start choosing your words like spells, intentional, minimal, clear. You start asking people what they meant instead of assuming. You reread the text before reacting. You let tone matter more than timing. And most of all, you practice the hardest language of all, silence. Because sometimes, the truest thing you can say is nothing. Just presence, just breath, just sitting with someone in the space between the noise. And strangely, that's when you realize how much of the test was never about speaking. It was always about connection, the bridge under the words, the moment when someone feels seen, not because you had the perfect sentence, but because you stayed. The test isn't, can you say it perfectly? Can you mean it? Can you hear what wasn't said? Can you respond with more than words? And when you get that part right, even just once, it feels like something clicks. The glitch smooths. The static fades. The message somehow gets through. You're walking through a crowd, maybe downtown, maybe just a crowded social feed, and your brain starts doing that thing again. That anxious, spinning, contradictory thing. You spot a stranger yelling at traffic and think, wow, people are awful. Then someone else holds the door for you and you whisper, maybe there's hope. You hold both thoughts at once, and they're both true-ish. Welcome to the ethics portion of the test. It's not multiple choice. There's no Scantron sheet, no buzzer that goes off when you make the wrong moral move. You're not even sure what's being tested half the time. Is it honesty, compassion, consistency, capacity to not yell in public? Who knows? All you get are these vague instructions. Be good. Do the right thing. Don't be a jerk. But no one hands you the grading criteria. You're expected to choose wisely with no universal definitions and no peek at anyone else's answers. It's almost unfair. Or maybe that's the point. Maybe Earth's test isn't about clarity, it's about discernment. Ancient texts wrestled with this too. The Ten Commandments, the Tao Te Ching, the Code of Hammurabi, all attempts to define right. But even they don't agree. One tradition says love your enemy, another says crush them. One praises solitude, another commands community. So which is it? Historians still argue whether moral systems arise from divine wisdom or evolved social contracts. Either way, the effect is the same. You're walking a tightrope between competing values, trying not to trip over your own principles. And modern life, it complicates everything. You're told to tell the truth until it offends someone. Be generous until it disrupts your budget. Forgive people, but not those people. You're trapped in a moral paradox soup where every decision feels like a trick question. You hold the door for someone, good job, but now you're holding it awkwardly for 6 more people. Fail, pass, who's keeping score? And don't get started on the internet. One minute you're being applauded for speaking out, the next you're canceled for not phrasing it perfectly. Morality online is like trying to read the test while it's still being written in emojis. There's a fringe theory that Earth's entire curriculum is built around moral weightlifting. That every encounter is an ethical gym session, meant to strengthen your values through friction. Not to make you perfect, but to make you choose. Think about it. Kindness that comes easily isn't much of a test. Forgiving someone who apologizes perfectly, a breeze. But what about the person who never does? The one who hurt you and moved on like it was a Tuesday? That's the essay question. Can you release the weight anyway? You start to notice the test isn't asking, did you win the argument? It's asking, did you keep your integrity while losing? And then there's the classic trolley problem. You know the one. A train's about to hit 5 people unless you pull a lever and redirect it toward one person. What do? Philosophers have argued about it for decades, but in real life, you're on that track daily. Someone cuts you off in traffic and you have to choose, respond with rage or restraint. Your friend makes a bad decision. Do you call them out, stay quiet, join in? Ethics in theory is clean. In practice, it's messy. Even your personal code isn't static. What you once swore you'd never do, you sometimes do, out of desperation, out of love, out of boredom even. And suddenly you realize you're not failing the test. You're in it, learning, adjusting, revising. That revision, that's part of the curriculum. And here, where it gets deeper, the test doesn't just examine your actions, it weighs your intentions. You can do the right thing for the wrong reason, or the wrong thing for the right reason. Good luck grading that. Let's say you donate money to charity, but only to impress someone. Does the good still count? Or you lie to protect someone's feelings. Are you a bad person or a compassionate one? The test doesn't always tell you. In Buddhism, they talk about right action as part of the Eightfold Path, but even there, context matters. Same with Confucian ethics, which depend heavily on roles. What's right for a parent might not be right for a student. So it's not a fixed formula, it's a practice. And sometimes you'll get it wrong. You'll snap at someone you love, stay silent when you should speak when you should breathe. Welcome to the advanced class, Forgiveness 301, Self-Edition. Because Earth's test isn't just about judging others, it's about judging yourself gently. You learn that morality isn't a mountain you climb and conquer. It's a mirror you clean every day, knowing it'll get fogged again by morning, but you still wipe it anyway. And sometimes, in the middle of this ethical fog, someone surprises you. A stranger returns your lost wallet. A kid stands up for a friend. An old enemy shows you kindness without reason. And suddenly, the test feels less lonely, less abstract. You remember that most people, like you, are just trying their best with incomplete instructions and a questionable number of bathroom breaks. So what is the right answer? Maybe there isn't one. Maybe the real question is, did you stay kind? Did you stay honest, at least to yourself? Did you try even when no one was watching? Because if this is a test, and you're unsure of the answers, then asking better questions might be your only hope. What does right mean in this moment? What does good cost? And what kind of person do I become if I keep choosing this? No one's going to hand you a gold star for holding the door, or being patient with someone who doesn't deserve it, or choosing silence when anger would have felt better. But that doesn't mean it doesn't count. Maybe Earth's examiners don't grade on correctness. Maybe they grade on courage. You're brushing your teeth or staring blankly into the fridge or walking the same route you always do, and then out of nowhere you get a ripple of something strange, a flicker, like your mind tripped over itself. You freeze for a second, blink. The moment passes, but it leaves a whisper behind, I've been here before. Déjà vu, the most polite little existential crisis. It doesn't announce itself. It just happens. A fragment of familiarity where there should be none. A sense that this exact moment, this room, this breath, that pigeon glaring at you from the sidewalk, has all unfolded before. But when? How? The scientific explanation is brain misfiring, neural circuits crossing wires, your short-term memory double-logging a moment like hitting save twice. Case closed. Except it doesn't feel like a glitch. It feels like a message. And if Earth is a test, that message might be this: you're close. Because déjà vu is only one of the ways the test whispers at you from behind the curtain. The other, of course, is the dream world. Dreams, the nightly portal to a realm that obeys none of your waking logic and all of your deepest fears. You fall asleep hopping to rest, and suddenly you're back in high school wearing a hoodie made of bees. You wake up with your heart racing and a vague sense that your subconscious is either unwell or trying to get something across. Dreams don't play by the rules of time, or gravity, or social decorum, and yet they often feel true, more real than real, like memories from a life you don't consciously remember living. And maybe that's not a bug, maybe it's another clue. There's a fringe idea that dreams aren't just psychological maintenance, they're visits, glimpses, study sessions in the classroom behind the veil, where the real you checks in with the test facilitator to discuss how badly you misunderstood the last question about boundaries. Some dream researchers suggest you're rehearsing possible futures. Others say you're processing past wounds. The metaphysical camp, they think you're traveling, learning, remembering what the test is actually for. Historians still argue whether ancient dream temples, like those in Egypt or Greece, were sacred spaces for healing or just elaborate placebo machines with better branding. But either way, they were taken seriously. Dreams weren't just entertainment, they were evidence. And when you start tracking them, something weird happens. You begin to notice repeated symbols, a staircase, a forest, an old house that somehow contains every childhood fear and every version of your grandmother. Your dreams start to feel like a language, coded, slippery, emotional Morse code. And the more you pay attention, the more it feels like the test is speaking to you. But not clearly. Oh no, never clearly. Just enough to suggest a question. Are you paying attention? And then there's the simulation whisper. You know the one. It creeps in during déjà vu, or when something improbable unfolds perfectly. When a streetlight flickers exactly as you walk beneath it, and your playlist shuffles into the exact right song, and the bus you didn't plan to catch pulls up like it was summoned. It's the whisper that says, "This isn't random. This is built. This is running." You've heard the idea before, simulation theory. That maybe you're living in a hyper-advanced program, part of someone else's experiment, not as science fiction, but as an actual possibility being explored by very serious people in very expensive chairs. Even Elon Musk, digital sorcerer and meme warlock, has toyed with the idea. And while you don't need to believe in Matrix-style battery farms to feel the echo, it does start to make Earth's test feel more structured. Think about it. You're born into a body you didn't choose, with amnesia, in a system full of patterns. You're handed quests, get a job, find love, make meaning, and offered a limited number of years to do it all before your consciousness expires. Doesn't that sound like a video game? An RPG with really advanced graphics and questionable NPC behavior. You don't respawn as far as you know, but there are clues. The universe rewards attention. Miracles happen when you least expect them. Glitches occur. Time bends, well, at least your experience of it does. Hours evaporate during joy. Seconds stretch during grief. And sometimes, in moments of presence, time just vanishes. The test might not be about solving the simulation. It might be about what you do with the awareness that you're in it. Do you panic? Do you rebel? Do you lean in and try to play it well? Because here's the thing. Even if it is a simulation, even if your entire reality is code stitched together by some bored alien grad student, your feelings are real. Your decisions matter. Your impact ripples. Maybe the simulation theory is just a metaphor, a modern myth for an ancient sensation, that life is crafted, that you're not just drifting, that there's design, even if you can't decode it. And if that's true, then all the weird stuff, the déjà vu, the dreams, the impossible timing, it's not a distraction. It's the edge of the test paper curling up, letting you peek at the next question. You don't have to understand it, you just have to notice it. Maybe when you dream of flying, it's not fantasy, it's remembering something real you once knew. Maybe deja vu is you grazing the edges of a timeline you walked before. Maybe the moments that feel like you're being watched aren't paranoia. They're observation, feedback, someone or something checking in. Not to punish you, but to study you. Because if this is a test, someone has to be collecting data. And maybe every time you pause, every time you question, every time you say, "Wait a second," you're passing a part of it. Not by having the answers, but by noticing the questions. Time, that slippery, stretchy, stubborn illusion you wear like a wristwatch and still somehow never fully understand. You're told it's linear, past, present, future, marching forward in an orderly line like schoolchildren with good posture. But you felt it, haven't you? Time doesn't always behave. Sometimes it drags, like when you're stuck in a waiting room with a magazine from 2008. Other times it evaporates, like an entire Sunday afternoon vanishing into a screen. And occasionally, just occasionally, it pauses. A breath, a freeze frame, a perfect moment when everything just is, and you think this is it. Then it's gone. So if Earth is a test, maybe time isn't just a countdown clock. It's part of the challenge. Because you don't get a timer ticking in the corner of your vision. No scoreboard. No 2 lives left message flashing after a bad day. You don't know how much time you have. That's the first twist. The second, you're expected to act like you do. All the big questions, what should I do? Who should I become? When should I stop scrolling and start doing something meaningful? They are all tangled up in time, and the test loves to complicate that. You're told to plan for the future, live in the present, and heal the past, simultaneously, with a calendar that seems to shrink every year. Ancient civilizations had different relationships with time. The Mayans had cyclical time. History wasn't a straight line, it was a wheel. The Greeks split time into chronos, clock time, and kairos, divine timing. In some cultures, ancestors lived in a timeless now, always present. For them, time was sacred, elastic, not something you managed, but something you respected. Historians still argue whether our modern obsession with productivity is progress or spiritual decay dressed up as efficiency. After all, you're not a machine. You're not here to optimize every second like you're being judged by a celestial life coach with a stopwatch. But society treats time like currency. Spend it wisely. Don't waste it. Time is money. And yet you can't own it. You can't pause it. You can't rewind it. You're just renting every moment and you don't even know the lease length. And here's the wild part. Some of your biggest test questions show up when time feels the most unstable. Like when you're waiting for news that could change everything, or when you're grieving and the hours feel like they've lost their structure, or when you're falling in love and entire evenings vanish inside a gaze. Time bends, not in physics, but in feeling. The test knows that. Maybe the challenge isn't just how you use time, but how you perceive it. Can you be still? Can you let a moment expand? Can you delay gratification in a world built on instant response? Because time has a sense of humor. You spend your youth racing toward adulthood, only to spend your adulthood trying to slow everything down. You put off joy until later, then later becomes never. You think you have time, and then someone you love doesn't. And suddenly, every moment gets heavier, sharper, more precious. There's an idea, whispered more than declared, that Earth's real test is about presence. Not just being here, but being here fully in this exact minute. Feeling your breath, noticing the way your tea cools, hearing your own heartbeat as it reminds you quietly that it's still on the clock. But the test makes this hard. It throws distractions at you like confetti: deadlines, schedules, notifications, alarms. You rarely get to experience a moment without it pointing you toward the next one. Even your memories betray you. They're soft, unreliable, rewritten by emotion. You think back and say, that was the best summer, but was it? Or was it just the one that didn't hurt? And the future, oh, the future, that elusive mirage, full of possibility and anxiety and to-do lists you haven't written yet. You project forward trying to predict the test instead of taking it. But what if time is the ultimate test environment? What if not knowing how long you have is what makes your choices meaningful? What if the pressure isn't cruelty, it's context? Think about it. If you did know the exact number of days you had, would you act the same? Would you delay love? Would you save that outfit for a special occasion? Would you still ghost people for sport? Or would you start treating every hour like it's part of something sacred? Some believe time is an illusion, a byproduct of human consciousness processing causality, that outside this world there is no before or after, just now, one infinite moment. If that's true, then maybe Earth is the only place where time matters, where seconds are a resource you spend. And the test, it's whether you waste them. But waste is subjective. Some of your most important moments look unproductive, sitting with a friend in silence, watching clouds move, reading the same paragraph 5 times because it feels good. These aren't failures, they're grace notes, breath marks, evidence that you're present. And presence, that might be the real exam. Can you be in your life? Not just plan it, review it, and try to monetize it. Can you recognize a moment as it's happening, not just in hindsight? Can you look at a sunset and not reach for your phone? These are time-based challenges, invisible questions, the kind of test you don't know you're taking until it's already graded. And maybe the grade isn't a number. Maybe it's a feeling. Satisfaction, peace, alignment. Maybe the reward for passing the time test isn't more time. It's knowing you lived the time you had. So tonight, maybe don't try to solve time. Maybe just feel it. Let it slow down for once. Let it pool around you like warm water. Let it hum softly as you breathe and remember, you're not late, you're not behind, you're right on time. Even if you don't understand the clock. You're lying in bed, or on the couch, or on the floor surrounded by snack wrappers and mild existential dread, and you realize something loud. You haven't had a single silent moment all day. Your ears are still ringing from the endless scroll of alerts, conversations, TikToks you didn't ask for, and that one ad you accidentally watched twice. Your brain feels like it's been at a carnival all day, and not the cozy cotton candy kind. The kind with flashing lights, broken speakers, and a suspicious clown yelling like and subscribe. Welcome to the distraction layer. If Earth is a test, this is the fog machine, the part that fills the exam room with shiny objects, unnecessary noise, and just enough chaos to keep you from noticing what's actually important. You don't mean to get lost in it, but the moment you sit still, 100 options appear. Scroll, click, snack, organize, binge, repeat. It's not that you don't care about growth, it's just that there's a new season out, and your phone lit up, and suddenly it's 2:37 a.m. and you're not sure where the last 5 hours went. And that's the trick. Distraction doesn't feel bad. It feels better, easier. It's like a warm blanket of "I'll deal with that later." Ancient philosophers didn't have Instagram, but they understood distraction. Marcus Aurelius warned against being pulled from your nature by trivial thoughts. The Bhagavad Gita warned of the wavering mind. Even Buddhist monks, they wrestled with monkeys in their heads, only their monkeys weren't playing Candy Crush. Historians still argue whether modern tech is uniquely destructive or just the newest version of the same old brain fog. But you don't need a textbook to tell you. Distraction feels different now. It's faster, stickier, personalized. You're not just getting ads. You're getting ads that know you watched that one documentary about mushrooms 3 weeks ago and have been overthinking your diet ever since. And it's not just digital. Distraction is baked into modern life. Your inbox is full. Your to-do list reproduces like rabbits. Your car makes that weird noise again. The fridge is judging you. There's a protest happening somewhere. The world is ending again. And also, you forgot to text your cousin back. You can't think straight, and thinking clearly might be part of the test. There's a theory, admittedly unscientific but fun to whisper, that distraction is one of Earth's most dangerous trap questions. That every soul arrives with a mission, a purpose, a goal, and then gets lured away by shiny objects. That the challenge isn't surviving the distractions, it's remembering you're being distracted. Because sometimes distraction looks like productivity. You organize your desk instead of finishing that scary email. You start a new book instead of processing what the last one triggered. You answer everyone else's messages while ignoring the quiet, heavy one from yourself. And here's the wild part: some distractions are beautiful, necessary even. A nap, a silly meme, a spontaneous dance party in your kitchen with a broom as your partner. These aren't wrong, they're breathers. Moments that say, hey, it's okay to laugh. But you know the difference. Deep down, you feel it. The line between rest and escape. Rest renews you, escape fogs you. You start forgetting what you came here for. You get so busy consuming, you forget to create. So wrapped up in watching other people's lives, you forget to live yours. That might be the most dangerous part of the distraction layer. It keeps you busy. You're doing something, always something, which makes it easy to miss the fact that you're not doing what matters. You've felt that, haven't you? That hollow exhaustion at the end of a day filled with effort, but no meaning. That ache that says, I was alive all day, but I wasn't really there. The test notices that. So how do you navigate this fog? First, you start numbing it. You say this is a distraction, out loud if you have to, like you're breaking a spell. That click you almost made, distraction. That rabbit hole of research you don't actually need right now, distraction. That 7th tab open to a review of a blender you'll never buy. Yeah. Second, you start pausing. Just for a breath, a beat, long enough to ask, is this helping? Sometimes it will be, sometimes it won't. The power is in asking. Then, if you're feeling bold, you start creating moments of boredom. Actual, honest boredom. The kind where your brain has nothing to do but be. It'll fight back at first. Start chewing on anxieties like old gum. But if you wait, something shifts. Your mind quiets, your thoughts reorganize, insights slip through, the test questions reveal themselves. The distraction layer isn't evil, it's just sticky. And Earth seems to love testing how easily you get stuck. You can scroll, you can stream, you can mute the parts of yourself that feel too heavy. But if you want to wake up, you have to unplug, not forever, not dramatically, just long enough to hear your own signal again. Because under the noise, you remember something. You have a voice. You have a path. You came here with something to do. And while the distractions will always be there, friendly, flashy, fun, you get to choose. To mute the fog. To say, not now. To return to yourself. Even just for a moment. Even just for this breath. You're standing under a tree, maybe literally, maybe in your mind, and something strange happens. You breathe differently, slower. Your shoulders unclench without asking permission. The chaos quiets, just a bit. Nature does that to you, without words, without logic, without notifications. It's as if the whole earth exhales, and you remember, this is the original interface. Before buildings, before schedules, before society downloaded its updates, this was the classroom, the forest, the stream, the quiet rise and fall of sun and moon and tide. Nature didn't need to explain itself. It was the explanation. So if Earth is a test, maybe this. The mossy, leafy, salty breezed part is the answer key. The cheat sheet hiding in plain sight. You start to see it. The symmetry of leaves, the patience of mountains, the stubborn hope of wildflowers growing out of concrete. None of it asks permission. None of it rushes. Nature just is, and somehow that's a lesson. In ancient times, every natural element had spirit. Wind wasn't just air, it was movement, presence. Rivers were storytellers, trees were witnesses. From the druids to the shamans to the mountain monks, nature wasn't scenery, it was scripture. Historians still argue whether animism, the belief that everything is alive and meaningful, was primitive superstition or profound understanding. Either way, it gave people something we've mostly misplaced: reverence. Because now, let's be honest, you treat nature like background, a setting, a weekend escape from the screen. You walk through it with earbuds in, half listening, half scrolling, half there. And yet, when you finally stop, really stop, it always knows what to say. That's not an accident. Nature doesn't explain itself in words, but it does whisper in pattern, in metaphor. The tree doesn't grow overnight. It grows silently, in rings you'll never see unless you cut it down, which, ironically, is how a lot of people treat their own growth. The ocean doesn't apologize for its power. It just returns, again and again, relentless, cleansing, teaching you the sacred rhythm of release. Fire destroys but also clears the dead, makes room for seeds that only sprout through heat. A harsh lesson, but a necessary one. And have you noticed how nature never hurries, yet everything gets done? Your to-do list never had a chance. Maybe that's the real test. Can you remember how to be part of nature, not just on Earth? Because right now, most of humanity acts like a guest overstaying their welcome. Lights always on, fridge left open, loud conversations at 3 a.m. You pave rivers, flatten hills, bottle the breeze, then wonder why nothing feels sacred anymore. But when you sit beneath a tree or stand barefoot in the grass or hear rain on the roof and choose to listen, suddenly the static drops out and the test feels less hostile. You remember you're not here to dominate, you're here to harmonize. Even your body knows it. Your nervous system literally recalibrates in natural settings. Your cortisol drops in forests. Your heartbeat synchronizes with the rise and fall of waves. Some researchers call it biophilia, the innate human tendency to seek connection with nature. That's not poetic, that's measurable. And yet you forget, again and again, pulled into noise, plastic, pavement. So the test resets. The sun rises whether or not you deserve it. The moon offers her light without asking for likes. The stars keep showing up, billions of them, just in case you ever decide to look up again. The earth is patient, too patient. But maybe that's part of the curriculum too. Because every now and then nature gives you a jolt, a storm, a wildfire, an earthquake, a reminder that this planet isn't a background prop, it's alive, and it will course correct with or without your consent. You don't own this test site, you're just renting time here. And still, nature forgives. You plant a tree, and it thanks you with shade you'll never sit under. You clean a beach, and the tide slowly returns its gratitude. You stop spraying chemicals for one season, and the bees, those fuzzy little miracle workers, start coming back. You're not powerless here. You're connected, that's the lesson. You were never meant to be separate from nature. You are nature, confused by mirrors and office chairs. You're not above the forest. You're a clever little ape who figured out espresso and forgot how to sit still. But it's okay. The test allows make-up assignments. So maybe today, you find one moment to reconnect. Open a window, touch a tree, watch a cloud, say thank you, not with words but with attention. Because attention is reverence, and reverence might just be the real passcode. Nature doesn't need you to save it, just to remember it. And maybe when you do, the test changes, softens, starts guiding you not with signs and omens but with the sound of wind in the leaves. That's the signal. That's the path. That's the part of the test that doesn't require you to do anything, just to notice, just to be, just to breathe. You wake in the middle of the night, no reason, no warning. The room is dark, the air still, and there it is again, that quiet ache in your chest, that uninvited visitor. Grief. It doesn't knock, it just arrives. Sometimes with a memory, sometimes with a name, sometimes with nothing but a weight. Loss is one of those parts of the test you can't study for. You don't know when it will show up, or how deeply it will dig. And just when you think you've passed it, it returns in a new disguise. It comes in many forms. The death of a person, the end of a relationship, the letting go of a dream you were sure was yours. The moment you look in the mirror and realize an old version of yourself is gone, and you didn't even say goodbye. If Earth is a test, then grief is the final essay question you can't skip. Because nothing prepares you for the emptiness that follows loss. It's not just sadness, it's displacement. It's a shift in the shape of the world. Everything familiar becomes unfamiliar. You try to carry on, but your reality is tilted now. Just slightly, just enough. Ancient cultures had rituals for this. Real time, real space. Grief wasn't something you hid in the bathroom or apologized for at work. It was a season, a ceremony, a shared weight. In some traditions, people wore black for a year. In others, they sang the name of the departed every morning. In parts of West Africa, grief is danced out, pounded into the earth with bare feet, rhythm, and wailing. Historians still argue whether mourning rituals were more psychological aid or spiritual passage. But one thing's clear, we used to know how to grieve. Now we rush it, hide it, try to get back to normal. As if normal still exists once someone or something you loved is gone. And the test doesn't wait. You're expected to keep showing up, make small talk, pay bills, fold laundry while your heart is falling apart. But grief, it teaches, slowly, brutally, honestly. It teaches you what matters. It wipes away pretense. It makes you realize how little time we really have, how fragile every connection is, how deeply we're meant to care, even though it hurts. And fear, grief's anxious sibling, sits right next to it. Fear of change, fear of more loss, fear that the next goodbye will break you completely. You start bracing for things before they even leave, pre-grieving just in case. But that's the trick of the test. The more you fear loss, the less you live. So eventually, you soften, not because the grief disappears, but because you stop resisting it. You learn to sit with it, to let it teach without drowning you. You realize grief isn't just about who or what is gone. It's about the love that remains. You cry not because it's over, but because it meant something. And pain, when you let it be seen, has a strange way of transforming, not into joy, not right away, but into understanding, into compassion. You start noticing others in grief, the tight smile, the slow walk, the voice that cracks in the middle of a sentence. You nod silently, you know you've walked that hallway. There's a Japanese practice called kintsugi, mending broken pottery with gold, making the cracks more visible, not less. The wound becomes the art. Maybe the same is true for you. Maybe the parts of you that hurt the most are the parts that shine. Of course, that doesn't mean you enjoy it, or that every loss has a silver lining. Some things are just hard. Some goodbyes feel unnecessary, cruel even. But if Earth is a test, maybe this is the hardest lesson of all. How to hold love after the object of that love is gone. Because grief doesn't ask you to move on. It asks you to move with it, to carry it like a stone in your pocket, heavy but smooth, something you reach for when the air feels thin. And one day, quietly, you'll notice it's changed. Not vanished, but softened, like a scar that no longer aches when the weather changes. And in its place, something strange may bloom. Gratitude, not for the pain, but for the love that made the pain possible. You realize the price of loving anything fully is the risk of losing it. And still you love. You open your heart again, maybe not quickly, maybe with trembling hands, but you do. Because part of the test, perhaps the most important part, is not whether you can avoid loss, but whether you can keep loving, knowing that loss will come. And somehow, despite everything you do. Because you remember, what broke your heart also built it. You see them across the room, or across the screen, or maybe you just feel them before you see them, an electric awareness, like your heart took a deep breath without asking permission. And just like that, logic goes on vacation. You're in it now. Love. If Earth is a test, love is definitely the weirdest question on the sheet. The one written in swirly cursive, half in invisible ink, with a post-it that says, "Be careful, but also dive in head first." Love makes you irrational, euphoric, wrecked, alive. It alters your perception, distorts your judgment, derails your plans, and somehow still makes perfect sense in the moment. Honestly, if this is a test, love might be the essay question and the extra credit. You try to define it, to bottle it. Love is connection. Love is vulnerability. Love is chemical, sure. But also, love is the reason you can't concentrate for 3 days after someone texts, "Hey," at 1:43 a.m. Ancient texts have tried to classify it. The Greeks had multiple words. Eros, romantic, fiery love. Philia, friendship, loyalty. Agape, unconditional, often divine love. Storge, familial, steady love. Ludus, playful, flirtatious love. Pragma, practical, enduring love. Each one a facet, a filter, a way to categorize the madness, because love refuses to stay in one form. It evolves, burns hot, cools slow, comes back around in someone else's face when you least expect it. Historians still argue whether love was always considered noble, or if it evolved as society shifted from survival to something more poetic. For a long time, marriages were transactions. Love was a luxury, if not an outright inconvenience. Now we romanticize it, build movies around it, buy candles with names like Cozy Love Spell. We swipe, search, analyze, overshare. Still, for all the technology and terminology, love remains a mystery. And maybe that's the test. Because love defies logic. It demands presence. It forces growth. You can't love well and stay stagnant. You can't love deeply without becoming vulnerable. And that vulnerability, that's where the lesson sits. When you let someone in, really in, You hand them the keys to the parts of yourself you usually keep locked. You say, "Here, this is where I'm tender, please don't drop it." Sometimes they do. Sometimes you do. And yet you keep trying. Because something in you knows this is part of the curriculum. Maybe the test isn't can you find love, but can you keep loving after the fallout? After the betrayal, the disappointment, the days when love feels like work and silence, when it's not grand gestures but tiny choices, showing up, softening, choosing kindness over ego again and again. Or maybe the trickiest part is realizing you don't need another person to unlock it. Self-love is a whole separate quiz. It's easy to offer kindness to others, but can you offer it to the parts of yourself you usually silence? The jealous one, the scared one, the unworthy one. Can you say, "I see you, I love you anyway"? That might be the hardest test of all. Because love is a mirror, a magnifier. It reflects back everything you haven't faced, every story you've told yourself about what you deserve. It cracks you open not just to joy, but to the parts of yourself you've hidden under success, sarcasm, and playlists that scream, "I'm totally fine." And when two people do that, really meet each other, flaws and all, it's magic. The kind of magic that makes you believe maybe Earth isn't all punishment and pop quizzes. Maybe there's beauty too. Still, love asks questions. Can you stay when things get quiet? Can you forgive, not just them but yourself? Can you hold joy without fearing the other shoe? Can you keep showing up even when the spark dims, and all that's left is the decision to stay? Sometimes love ends, not because it failed, but because it taught what it came to teach. You walk away bruised but wiser, and still, you don't regret it. Because love, even when it hurts, expands you. It shows you what you're capable of, the depths of your empathy, the limits of your patience, the size of your heart, which is somehow always bigger than you thought. And then there's the weird part. Love doesn't stay in one place. You might fall in love with a person, or a city, or a moment, or a song that hits just right at 2 a.m. in a rainy car, or an idea that cracks open your whole brain. Love isn't limited to romance. It's a frequency, a state of awareness, a way of being. And once you've felt it, really felt it, you can't unknow it. You start finding it everywhere. In the way your dog greets you like a returning hero. In the way your friend remembers your favorite snack when you're sad. In the sunset you almost didn't notice, but then did. In the stranger who smiles at you like they see something. In the way you finally start being kind to yourself, slowly, awkwardly, but with sincerity. And in those moments, the test doesn't feel like a test anymore. It feels like a love letter. From Earth, from the universe, from whatever force programmed this whole strange classroom in the first place. It whispers, "You're doing just fine." You don't like to think about it too much, but it waits at the edge of every moment just out of frame. Death, the test's quietest question, the final one maybe, or the first depending on how you look at it. You try to avoid it, you dress it up. You soften it with euphemisms, passed away, moved on, transitioned. You light candles, say prayers, wear black, but still it comes, always. If Earth is a test, then death is the submission button. The moment when you hand it all in, every answer, every revision, every blank space you meant to come back to but didn't. And the most haunting part, you don't know when it'll happen. That's part of the design. No warnings, no countdown, just the strange truth that every breath could be your last, and yet you keep making plans. You keep filling your cart with groceries. You renew your passwords. You schedule dentist appointments months in advance. It's almost funny, almost. Ancient cultures treated death like a door, not an ending. The Egyptians packed for it. The Vikings welcomed it with battle cries. The Tibetans had an entire book of the dead, a user manual for what happens next. Historians still argue whether these elaborate death traditions were attempts at comfort or control. But they all agree on one thing: people have always known this wasn't it. That this life, the noise, the hunger, the hope, was only part of the story. But here in your culture, death is mostly ignored, tucked away in sterile rooms, discussed in hushed voices, treated like failure, like something shameful, something that shouldn't happen, even though it always does. So you distract yourself. You talk about legacy, about bucket lists, about making the most of your time, all while trying not to think about the fact that no one knows how much time they have. Maybe that's the core of the test, acting like you have forever while knowing you don't. It changes everything. Because when you remember death, even briefly, it sharpens the moment. Suddenly, your coffee tastes better. Your friend's laugh feels like a treasure. You reach for your partner's hand with a little more tenderness. You realize this might be the last time you do this exact thing in this exact way, and that makes it sacred. The test doesn't want to scare you, but it does want to see how you behave under time pressure. Will you love boldly? Will you forgive quickly? Will you stop waiting for the right time to be who you already are? There's a line some people whisper when grief cracks them open: we're all just walking each other home. And maybe that's true. Maybe the test isn't graded on wealth or achievement, but on how gently you walked with others, on how well you carried their memory once they were gone, on whether you learned to be fully here before you had to go there. But death isn't just about people. Sometimes it's the death of a chapter, a dream, a version of yourself you've outgrown but still mourn. You feel it when you move away from a place you loved, when a friendship fades without a fight, when you finally stop chasing the thing that was never going to love you back. Those deaths count too. You're taught to fear endings, but if you really look, most of your growth came from something that ended. The job that broke you, it taught you boundaries. The relationship that shattered you, it showed you what love isn't and maybe what it could be. The failure that embarrassed you, it pointed you back to your real path. Maybe death isn't failure. Maybe it's the reset button, the gentle hand that says, this version is complete, let's try the next. And if you've ever sat beside someone who was leaving, really leaving, you know how still the world becomes. No phone matters, no to-do list, no ego, just breath, connection, memory, all the things you can't pack in a suitcase but somehow carry with you anyway. You see it in their eyes, not fear usually, just return, like they remember something you forgot, like they know something you're not supposed to yet. There's a theory, unprovable, unkillable, that in the moment of death you remember everything. The purpose, the plan, the full shape of the test. You remember that this was a game, a lesson, a school, a dream, and you're not scared anymore. You're home. But until then, you get to live with mystery, with the ache of not knowing, with the strange task of holding joy and sorrow in the same hand. And maybe that's the real test. Not to avoid death, but to make peace with it, to live so fully, so presently that when the time comes you don't cling, you just breathe and go. Not with fear, but with grace. Because you've been here long enough to know, everything that begins must end. But everything that ends might begin again. You pause mid-thought, maybe mid-life, and look up, really look, at the stars, at the sky, at the vast velvet dome that never answers back. And you wonder, is anyone watching? Not in a paranoid cameras in the wall way, but in the quiet, curious, hopeful sense. Like maybe, just maybe, this test has proctors, observers, witnesses, not grading every move with a red pen, but watching, taking notes, or silently cheering when you get a question right. The idea that someone or something is watching you isn't new. In fact, it's one of the oldest ideas we have. Gods, angels, ancestors, aliens, spirits, light beings, interdimensional energy tutors. You name it, someone has claimed it's keeping an eye on us. And if Earth is a test, then who gave it? Who's watching you fill out the answers? Who set up the maze and the metaphors and the heartbreaks and the sunsets? Who designed the curriculum? Some say it's God, capital G, one omniscient being watching from beyond time, equal parts stern teacher and cosmic parent. Others imagine a divine council, a kind of spiritual boardroom full of beings in robes, sipping wisdom tea and asking each other, how's subject 9843A doing with their abandonment lesson? Fringe theorists get a little weirder. They talk about the watchers, non-physical entities who observe human life like it's a kind of immersive reality show, not for entertainment but for research. Maybe Earth is a training ground for souls, and they're monitoring your progress, ready to help, if you remember to ask. There's even the idea of soul guides, personal tutors, essentially, who signed up to accompany you through this test. You can't see them, but they're there, whispering when you're quiet, nudging when you hesitate, face-palming when you date the same kind of person again. Historians still argue whether early shamanic visions of spirit guides were mystical truths or psychedelic side effects, but the stories remain. Across cultures, there's always someone watching, always someone helping, even if invisibly. And here's the twist, maybe they're not above you, maybe they're with you. Maybe the proctors aren't perfect. Maybe they've taken this test before and are just trying to help you not fall into the same potholes they did. Maybe they're rooting for you harder than you're rooting for yourself. Sometimes you feel them. In that strange warmth when you're alone but comforted. In the intuition that says, don't take that road. In the moment, you find something you didn't know you lost. In the whisper of your name with no speaker in sight. You chalk it up to coincidence, but still, part of you wonders. What if those moments are checkpoints? Little nudges from someone just outside the simulation saying, you're close, keep going. Or maybe the proctors are your future selves, watching past you struggle with today's question, wanting so badly to yell the answer but knowing they can't. Because if they do, you won't learn it. And the test requires learning. Still, it would be nice to hear a voice sometimes. A clear one. Not just cryptic license plates and mysterious dreams and the uncanny feeling that song lyrics are answering your thoughts. But maybe clarity isn't allowed here. Maybe the proctors can't interfere directly. Maybe they can only send symbols, dreams, signs, subtle stuff, just enough to suggest, not solve. And honestly, wouldn't you do the same? Imagine watching someone you love walk through a hard moment, knowing they need to figure it out for themselves, knowing that if you jump in and fix it, they'll miss the growth. It would break your heart. Maybe that's what the watchers feel. Maybe that's why you sometimes feel watched but not judged, guided but never forced. Of course, there's the other possibility. That no one's watching, that this is it, that you're the only witness and everything else is coincidence and chaos and overactive neurons trying to assign meaning where there is none. But that doesn't sit right, does it? Because something in you knows. It knows when you're aligned, when you're off track, when you're in the middle of a lesson, even if you don't understand it yet. You feel it when you say the right thing, when you catch yourself before repeating the same mistake, when you choose peace over the last word. Something buzzes quietly inside, like the proctors just nodded, smiled, and marked a quiet, heavy check mark next to your soul's name. Or maybe you are the proctor. What if you're watching yourself? What if part of you is always aware, outside of time, beyond the veiled, taking notes, offering support, and marveling at how brave you are for signing up for this wild, beautiful, painful test called Earth? That would explain the moments when you feel both lost and guided, when you surprise yourself with wisdom, when you comfort yourself better than anyone else could. Maybe it's not memory, it's oversight. Maybe part of you never forgot. And maybe that part's job isn't to intervene, just to witness, to say you did it, you tried, you learned. So the next time you get that tingle, that unplaceable sense that you're not alone, maybe don't brush it off. Maybe take a breath, smile quietly and say, I see you too. You sit with the thought for a while. Maybe it's not just me. Not just your test, not just your journey, but ours. The collective, the mess of us. 7 billion test takers fumbling through the same impossible questions with wildly different pencils. And suddenly, everything shifts. Because if Earth is a test, maybe it's not one person per desk. Maybe it's collaborative. Maybe humanity itself is being graded as a unit. And if that's true, well, we're not exactly acing it. You look around and see the chaos. Wars, division, exploitation, climate collapse looming like a blinking red warning light. All of it feels like the group project from hell, and half of us didn't even read the syllabus. But somehow, we're all still here, still turning in work, still showing up for office hours disguised as uncomfortable family dinners, awkward group chats, and midnight scroll sessions that land on something that finally makes sense. You start to wonder if the whole test is about how we treat each other. Not just individually, but systemically, culturally, universally. It's not just, did you grow? It's, did we? Ancient texts always hinted at this. The idea that humanity is more than the sum of its parts, that we rise and fall together. In Hinduism, the world moves through cosmic cycles, yugas, eras where collective behavior tips the scale toward harmony or destruction. The Hopi speak of multiple worlds that have come and gone, each ended not by fate, but by humanity's own behavior. Historians still argue whether these cycles were meant literally or metaphorically. But the message remains: what we do together matters. So maybe the test isn't, how enlightened can you become? Maybe it's, how much light can you share before the bell rings? The individual test is hard enough, but the collective one, that's next level, because now you have to work with people who didn't read the instructions, people who answer every question with violence, or profit, or denial. It's frustrating. You feel helpless, like the kid in the group who's trying to pull the grade up while others are drawing doodles in the margins. But still you try. You donate, you vote, you protest, you teach, you forgive, you listen, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because maybe the score isn't based on perfection, but on participation. And it goes deeper. You start seeing the test reflected in communities, nations, algorithms. You watch how kindness spreads and how cruelty does too. You realize your choices echo, that what you say online might ripple farther than you thought, that silence is an answer too. The collective test asks you to stay awake, even when it hurts, even when it's easier to look away. Because the exam room is on fire, literally in some places. And the proctors, if they're watching, must be wondering, can they work together before the bell rings? It's tempting to give up, to say, People are awful. To retreat into your corner of the test and focus only on your paper, but the test notices that. It asks, will you act for the greater good, even if you don't benefit personally? Will you care about a stranger's suffering? Will you do the right thing, knowing no one's watching, except maybe the stars? You're not graded in isolation. You're part of a species currently at a very awkward adolescence meets midlife crisis phase. Smart enough to build nuclear weapons, but not wise enough to stop hitting the snooze button on extinction. But we've made it this far. Through ice ages, plagues, inquisitions, internet comments, and still somehow we hold hands, we write songs, we plant trees we won't live to sit under. That has to count for something. Maybe the test isn't about avoiding failure. Maybe it's about how we respond when we've already failed. You look at the news and feel despair, but then you see a child planting wildflowers in a parking lot, a stranger holding space for someone's grief, a community showing up when no one else does. And you feel it again, that quiet click, that small nod from something bigger. This matters. The collective test isn't pass-fail, it's open-ended. The question isn't, will you save the world? It's, will you try, even if it's falling apart? You realize that every act of kindness, every moment of integrity, is a vote toward the version of humanity you want to become. You may not see the final grade, but you're helping write the outcome. You also realize you're not alone in this awareness. There are others, people you'll never meet, doing the same work, quietly, faithfully, living like the test matters, even if no one else around them seems to care. You are not the only awake one in the room. And maybe that's enough to shift the curve. Maybe we don't need everyone to remember the test. Just enough of us. Just enough to tip the scale. To pass, not alone, but together. You sit with the question longer than you'd like. It simmers in the background while you fold laundry, scroll the news, watch another late-night comedy special that somehow feels more like a documentary. The question, what if we already failed? It's a heavy one, a slow one, the kind that doesn't knock. It just settles in like dust on every untouched corner of your thoughts. Because when you look at the world, it's hard not to wonder. The climate's in crisis. Oceans rising, forests burning, species vanishing like we're checking them off a list. Hatred doesn't hide anymore. It's in the comments, on the news, running for office. People seem more connected than ever, and somehow lonelier than they've ever been. And you start to ask, did we miss the point? If Earth is a test, and we were meant to choose compassion, stewardship, unity, well, look around. Maybe we've already circled the wrong answers too many times. Maybe this is the retake. Some believe that humanity had other chances, that we've done this before, not metaphorically but literally, that previous civilizations rose, reached too far, and collapsed. Atlantis, Lemuria, lost knowledge buried under silt and silence. Historians still argue whether those are myths or misremembered truths. But even without ancient cities, there's no denying the cycle. Rise, hubris, fall, repeat. And here we are again, smart, loud, anxious, and distracted. So yes, maybe we've failed before. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the test was never about getting it perfect the first time. Maybe the real measure isn't the mistakes, it's the response. You can feel it, can't you? That pressure in the air, that urgency, like we're at a tipping point, like the final pages of the test are in front of us and the questions are getting bolder. Can you protect what you haven't valued? Can you change before you're forced to? Can you make peace with the mess and still move forward? The hardest part, you're not sure if it's too late. You recycle your bottle and still wonder what difference it makes. You vote, then watch everything crumble anyway. You speak out, only to be drowned by bots and trolls and apathy. It's exhausting. And the test seems to know that, because it keeps asking for effort even when results are invisible. It keeps presenting new chances, quiet ones, personal ones, to respond with hope when fear would be easier. Maybe it's a different kind of grading system now, one based not on outcomes but intentions. Maybe we're being asked, even if the world is broken, will you still care? Even if the ship is sinking, will you still sing? Even if no one else is listening, will you speak truth? Even if the system feels rigged, will you still play fair? This isn't about delusion. You're allowed to grieve the damage, allowed to name it, to rage, to cry, to say, we screwed this up. That honesty, it's part of the test too. But after the grief, what then? That's where things get interesting. Because failure doesn't mean the test ends. It just means we're in review mode, the do-over, the chance to walk a new way, maybe not fix everything, but fix something. And in that small repair, you might discover what the test was really measuring all along. Your capacity to hope, to rebuild, to keep going, even when the grade looks hopeless. You think of the moments that nearly broke you, personal ones, the heartbreaks, the job losses, the illness, the silence. And yet you're still here. You didn't quit. And maybe that's the answer. The world may be burning in places, but the seeds are still growing too, quietly, persistently. People are waking up, changing how they live, rethinking what matters. You see it in communities, helping each other when systems fail. In youth refusing to inherit the worst of what we built. In the way strangers still hold doors open, even in the middle of collapse. Maybe this is what grace looks like, failing collectively, then choosing to love anyway. To plant trees you'll never sit under. To write stories you won't finish. To fight for a future you might never live in. Because here's the thing, if we already failed, then we already know what not to do. That's information, that's data, that's the beginning of new wisdom. And maybe that's the retake, maybe that's the new test. Can we begin again, not with innocence but with experience? Can we do better, not because we're pure, but because we've seen what harm looks like and now we choose another way? You don't need to save the world. You just need to love it enough to stop pretending it's fine. You need to show up, small ways, daily, honestly. Because failure is only final if we stop learning. And Earth still gives us mornings, still gives us songs, still gives us each other. The test isn't over. Not yet. It starts with a whisper, a strange thought, soft at first, like a forgotten lyric rising up from somewhere deeper than memory. What if I chose this? Not this life, this test. Not the way it happened, not the hard parts, the heartbreaks, the late-night spirals, or the weird birthmark on your ankle. But the whole thing, the Earth experience, the rules, the forgetting, the chance to learn by falling on your face over and over again. What if this test wasn't given to you? What if you designed it? You sit with the idea, let it stretch its limbs. You sitting in some timeless room before all this began, nodding solemnly as the Earth assignment was explained. There would be pain, of course, confusion, gravity, grief, taxes, but also laughter, also sunrise, also mangoes. And you, bright soul, eternal and probably a little overconfident, said yes. Yes, I want to go. You agreed to forget who you were, To learn from scratch, to feel everything. To fall in love, lose people, make mistakes so vivid you'd carry them through lifetimes. You chose growth over comfort, curiosity over certainty, the ultimate immersive curriculum. It sounds wild, but somehow it feels familiar. You start seeing life differently through that lens, not as a punishment or a glitch or something to endure until you can escape, but as a design. A strange, wild, messy design you might have had a hand in. That family chosen. That wound pre-written. That one ex who somehow taught you more in 6 months than most people do in a decade. Contracted. Not to hurt you, but to activate something. The test wasn't to survive unscathed. It was to evolve. And if you designed it, maybe that's why the hard moments feel both devastating and important. Maybe that's why you cry in the car and still know, deep down, that this matters. There's a theory in some esoteric circles called pre-birth planning. That souls, before incarnating, meet with guides, those same watchful presences we mentioned earlier, and go over the syllabus. Not every detail, but the major points. Love, loss, lesson, transformation. Historians and scientists roll their eyes at this. They argue it's just a story humans invented to make meaning out of chaos. And maybe they're right. But if it is a story, it's a beautiful one. A story that turns pain into purpose. That makes you the author instead of the victim. That says, you're not here by accident, you're here by choice. And if that's true, then what else did you choose? Maybe you chose your gifts, your weird sense of humor, your ability to comfort others, your eye for beauty, maybe even your obstacles, the things that would force you to stretch, surrender, sharpen. You didn't come here to be perfect. You came here to experience, to taste, to touch, to remember. And maybe, just maybe, the forgetting was part of the test. Because if you remembered who you really were, limitless, eternal light, you wouldn't need to learn anything. You'd skip to the end. And that's not how this works. Earth is immersive. It only works if you believe it's real. So you wake up each day with amnesia. Then, piece by piece, the remembering begins. Through heartbreak, through art, through the way your pet looks at you, through the stranger who says something that cracks open your entire worldview on a random Tuesday. The clues are everywhere. You left them for yourself. The song that always makes you cry. The recurring symbol in your dreams. The person you've only known for a week, but feel like you've met across lifetimes. That's not coincidence, that's callback. Because if you wrote this test, you knew you'd need reminders. And the biggest one, your own intuition, that quiet tug, that inner compass, the voice that says this way, not that. You don't always listen, that's okay. It's part of the design, free will, detours, reroutes. But the test allows infinite redirections. You're never stuck. You're just in the part of the test where it looks like you are. And if you designed it, then the moments that broke you, they weren't the end. They were page turns. Every breakdown was a reveal. Every loss was a portal. Every mistake was a coded message saying, now you're ready for the next level. The test wasn't meant to trick you. It was meant to transform you. And maybe you're further along than you think. You've survived the chapters you thought would end you. You've made people laugh when you didn't feel like laughing yourself. You've shown up again and again, even when no one clapped. That's mastery. That's progress. Maybe the real examiners, the parts of you that never forgot, are already proud. Not because you got everything right, but because you kept going. You're still here, learning, loving, failing better. And if you did design this test, then maybe, just maybe, you also designed the ending. One where you finally remember who you are. One where the test paper fades and you look up, not to a judge, but to a version of you smiling, saying, "You made it, you did it. Even when you didn't know what you were doing, you did it." And then maybe you come back again. Not because you have to, but because you want to. Because Earth, for all its noise and mess and heartbreak, it's still the most beautiful test in the universe.